Hi, I'm Sasha from the Autism Helper, and in this episode of the mini video training series, we're going to talk about what is ABC data and why do you need to take it. So you might have heard this phrase ABC data talked about in the special ed or ABA world. Lots of acronyms thrown at you here. So ABC data stands for the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So the antecedent is looking at what happens before the behavior, and the consequence looks at what happens after the behavior. And when we take this type of data, we start looking at what things are happening in the environment before a problem behavior occurs and after a problem behavior occurs. The goal of this data is to figure out why the problem behavior is happening. Remember, all behavior is communication. So we want to figure out what this behavior is communicating in order to know how to intervene. We don't know what strategies are best for this type of behavior if we don't know what the function is. The function is another way to say the why of the behavior. So let's go a little more in depth into what the A, B, and C mean when we're collecting this type of data. So A, the antecedent. That means what happens before the behavior. So when we are looking at the antecedent to a behavior, you want to look at the whole context. You want to look at what the student was doing, who was around them, was there a demand presented, was an item taken away? Maybe the child was completely alone. Note the day and the time. These are all important information that you can use to kind of start to identify the why of the behavior. Let's jump to the C, the consequence. Now, I don't want you to think about consequence as that old school, like there will be consequences type way of thinking of consequence. Consequence is just any change to the environment that happened after the behavior. So did the student get to go to break time? Did a teacher tell the child to stop doing that? Actually, maybe there was no change to the environment. Maybe nothing changed and people just left the child alone. So you want to note that in the consequence. It can be a planned consequence, like a child is given a timeout, or an unplanned consequence, like all of his friends laughed with him. So really think about everything that could change within the scope of that consequence, what's happening right after the behavior when you're noting that in your ABC data. So why do we need to take ABC data? I actually already answered this question because I wanted you to keep listening. So I said this in the start of the video. We take ABC data because it's going to help us figure out why the problem behavior is happening. Once we figure out why a problem behavior is happening and what it's communicating, then we'll know the best strategies to pick from. If you skip this step and you jump right to strategies or right to interventions, you might be picking a strategy or an intervention that's actually making this behavior worse. Does that scare you? It should, because you shouldn't skip this step. This is essential at a function-based intervention. So for figuring out the why of the behavior before we're jumping to this intervention. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the mini video training series. Please follow us on YouTube or come over to our website to check out the rest of them.